The courthouse steps explode with camera flashes as Cassidy grips a 6-year-old's trembling hand. A billionaire's custody hangs in the balance, and she's the evidence. The nanny, who crossed every line, loved the wrong man, and now faces a judge's verdict that could destroy the only family she's ever built. One question tears through the courtroom silence. Ms. Rowe, are you in love with your employer? Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. The first time Cassidy Rowe saw the inside of the Hawthorne penthouse, she was wearing second-hand sneakers and carrying a plastic grocery bag full of craft supplies, praying the security guard wouldn't notice the dried paint on her fingers. She was 26, freshly evicted from a shared studio in Queens, and 3 days late on her phone bill. The elevator rose 42 floors in hushed, expensive silence, the kind that made her pulse thrum in her ears like a warning. When the doors slid open, the city spilled out beyond the foyer in a glittering, indifferent sweep, and the man waiting for her looked as if he owned every watt of light. Ms. Rowe? His voice was low, deliberate, the kind that could read a grocery list and make it sound like a contract. He extended a hand, no wedding ring, nails trimmed short, olive skin warm against her wind-chapped knuckles. Declan Hawthorne. She knew the name, of course. Half of New York did. Declan Hawthorne, 34, founder of Hawthorne Capital, the Midas Touch venture firm that turned startups into unicorns before breakfast. The papers called him ruthless. The gossip blogs called him gorgeous. Cassidy called him unemployed nanny interviewer number 3, and the only one who hadn't asked whether she planned to accidentally get pregnant for the health insurance. "I'm Cassidy," she said, and hated the way her accent flattened the vowels, the way Brooklyn clung to her like cheap perfume. He released her hand, stepped back. "Come in. Zoe's finishing her snack." The penthouse smelled of cedar and something darker. Espresso, maybe, or the leather of the sectional that curved like a comma through the living room. Everything was glass, stone, and right angles, yet someone had tucked a tiny pink cardigan over the back of a chair. Proof that a 6-year-old girl lived here among all the minimalism. Cassidy followed him across the wide plank oak, past a kitchen island bigger than her last apartment, to where a child sat on a velvet bar stool, kicking her bare heels against the brass footrest. "Zoe, this is Ms. Rowe." The girl had her father's thick dark hair, his hazel eyes, but hers were wider, softer, still capable of wonder. She was drawing on a white placemat with a purple marker that smelled like grape. Without looking up, she said, "Are you the new nanny or the new maid? Dad mixed them up last time." Declan's jaw flexed, irritation or maybe embarrassment. "Zoe?" Cassidy pulled out the chair opposite her. "Nanny, but I also make a mean grilled cheese if diplomacy fails." Zoe capped the marker, studied her. "Do you believe in mermaids?" "Absolutely. I tried to grow gills once, failed, but I still hold out hope." The girl's face cracked into a grin, and just like that, Cassidy felt the room tilt a fraction toward manageable. Declan leaned against the counter, arms folded. "Zoe starts first grade in 2 weeks. The last nanny left, abruptly. So we need someone who can stay through the school year, possibly longer. Hours are 6:30 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday. Occasional overnights if I'm traveling. Zoe has asthma, carries an inhaler. No scented candles, no peanuts. You'll coordinate with Mrs. Lee, the housekeeper. She comes twice a week." He spoke like a man dictating terms to a boardroom, but his eyes never left his daughter. Cassidy noticed the faint shadows beneath them, the stubble a shade too deliberate. Single dad exhaustion wore a different texture than hers. His was expensive cologne over sleeplessness. Hers was instant coffee and subway grime. "I can do all that," she said, "but I have a few conditions of my own." One eyebrow lifted, surprise, or the closest Declan Hawthorne came to it. "Which are?" "I keep my evenings. If I'm staying late, I need 24 hours notice. I don't do social media posts of Zoe, no matter how cute she looks in pigtails. And I eat dinner with her, at the table, not standing over the sink. Kids notice. Zoe piped up. Dad eats over the sink. He says it's efficient. Declan's mouth twitched, almost a smile, gone before it landed. Anything else? Yes, Cassidy said, heart thumping. You don't micromanage my craft budget. Glitter is non-negotiable. This time the twitch became real, a slow, reluctant curve that revealed a dimple high on his left cheek, the kind of detail cameras loved and bodyguards were paid to ignore. Deal, he said, and extended his hand again. She shook it, pulse jumping, when his thumb brushed her wrist. Accident, surely, but heat pooled beneath her ribs anyway. He released her, already moving toward the hallway. Mrs. Lee will give you keys. Start tomorrow. Just like that, the interview was over. Cassidy exhaled, the penthouse suddenly too quiet, too pristine, like a museum after hours. Zoe slid off the stool, patted around the island, and slipped her hand into Cassidy's paint-flecked fingers. Come see my room, she whispered. I have a castle that needs a dragon. Cassidy let herself be towed down a corridor lined with black and white cityscapes. Declan's taste, she guessed, all steel and shadow, until they reached a door painted the exact shade of cotton candy. Inside, chaos reigned. Doll limbs, glitter glue, a half-finished Lego Hogwarts. A canopy bed sagged beneath a mountain of stuffed animals. Zoe released her, dove into the pile, and emerged clutching a cardboard box. This is the castle. The dragon escaped. Dad says dragons aren't real, but I think he's just never met one. Cassidy sat cross-legged on the rug, accepted the box. Dragons are excellent at hide-and-seek. What's his name? Smokey. He breathes fire when he's scared. Smart dragon. Being scared is a good reason to breathe fire. Zoe tilted her head, considering. Are you scared? Cassidy thought of the rent she still couldn't pay, the sister she hadn't spoken to in months, the way Declan Hawthorne's voice curled around her spine like smoke. Sometimes, she admitted, but fire can keep you warm, too. From the doorway, Declan cleared his throat. Cassidy hadn't heard him approach. Now he filled the frame, shoulders blocking the hall light. Mrs. Lee has the keys, he said, eyes unreadable. Zoe, say goodbye. Zoe hugged Cassidy's neck, unexpected, fierce, then scampered past her father. Cassidy stood, cardboard dragon under one arm. I'll bring him back tomorrow, she said. With reinforcements. Declan's gaze dropped to her mouth, lingered, lifted. See that you do? The elevator ride down felt longer than the ascent. Cassidy stared at her reflection in the smoked glass walls. Thrift store denim jacket, paint in her hair, the faint flush on her cheeks that had nothing to do with summer heat. She told herself it was adrenaline, relief, the thrill of a paycheck. She did not think about the way his thumb had traced her pulse or how his voice had shaped her name like a question he wasn't ready to ask. Outside, the city hit her with its usual symphony. Horns, sirens, the metallic rattle of subway grates. She walked toward the Q train, dragon box under her arm, feeling the distance between Crown Heights and penthouse glory like a physical ache. Tomorrow she would return, apron tied, glue gun loaded. She would not think about her new boss's mouth, or the way his daughter's trust felt heavier than any invoice. She almost believed it. Declan watched from the living room window as Cassidy crossed Fifth Avenue, hair whipping in the wind, cardboard tucked like treasure beneath her arm. She moved like someone used to navigating crowds that didn't part for her, elbows sharp, stride quick. He told himself he'd hired her because Zoe had smiled, simple as that. The last nanny had left without notice, taking his schedule and his sanity with her. Cassidy Rowe had walked in with glitter in her pockets and sarcasm on her tongue, and for the first time in months, Zoe had asked what was for dinner instead of when Mommy was coming back. He did not think about the way Cassidy's voice had softened when she'd promised the dragon reinforcements, or how her eyes, storm gray, startled, had held his longer than necessary. He did not think about the faint freckle at the corner of her mouth, or the fact that he'd almost reached out to brush the paint from her cheek. Instead, he poured 2 fingers of Yamazaki, swallowed the burn, and told himself employees were off limits. Especially employees who believed in mermaids and ate dinner at tables. Tomorrow, he would leave before she arrived, avoid the kitchen, keep boundaries crisp as contract ink. He almost believed it. Cassidy's first Monday as Hawthorne Nanny began before the sun. She jolted awake at 5:42 a.m. to the shrill reminder that she now lived on someone else's clock, swiped the alarm, and inhaled the sour scent of her roommate's leftover Thai takeout. By 6:15, she was on the Q train, eyelids still sticky with sleep, tote bag heavy with washable glue sticks, emergency glitter, and the cardboard dragon now reinforced with pipe cleaner wings. She told herself the extra thump in her chest was caffeine deficiency, not the memory of Declan Hawthorne's voice saying her name like a verdict. The building's night doorman, Jose, gold-toothed and kind, waved her through without the clipboard interrogation he'd subjected the UPS guy to. "Mr. H is already up," he offered, sympathetically. Kitchen lights on. Cassidy stepped out of the elevator braced for glass-box silence. Instead, she found warmth, coffee, and the low hum of NPR. Zoe sat at the island in polka-dot pajamas, legs swinging, inhaler beside her cereal bowl like a tiny plastic talisman. Declan stood at the stove, spatula in hand, shirt sleeves shoved to the elbows, the knot of his tie already perfect. He glanced over his shoulder. Scrambled or omelet? The question was so casually domestic, she blinked. Either, whatever's faster. Zoe wants scrambled. You get the same. He tilted the pan, yellow curds folding like silk. Cassidy tried not to stare at the stretch of cotton across his shoulders, the way the morning light carved shadows along his forearms. She busied herself unpacking crayons instead. Zoe tugged her sleeve. Smokey needs a vet check before school. Right after breakfast, Cassidy promised. She poured milk, wiped a mustache from Zoe's upper lip, and felt Declan's gaze brush the nape of her neck. Fleeting, almost accidental, but it ignited a slow burn under her skin. At 7:30, he shrugged into his suit jacket, pocketed phone and car keys. Board meeting in Midtown, home by 6:30 unless the world ends. He hesitated, eyes narrowing on the dragon now perched on the windowsill. You glued wings. Sparkle reinforcements, she said, lifting her chin. His mouth curved, wicked, quick. Non-negotiable glitter. Heat crawled up her throat. Exactly. For a moment the kitchen held only the drip of the coffee maker. Then he stepped closer, close enough that she smelled cedar and something citrus clean. Zoe's inhaler stays in her backpack. If she coughs more than 3 times in a row, call me. If Jose buzzes a reporter, don't open the door. They still want pictures of the runaway bride story. Copy that. She meant to sound brisk, professional. Instead, the words came out husky. He studied her a beat too long. See you tonight, Cass. The nickname slipped between them like a secret. Then he was gone, footsteps swallowed by the elevator, leaving only the ghost of his breath against her cheek. Zoe tugged her back to earth. Can we make slime now? By 9 a.m., the penthouse glittered like a craft store explosion. Green glitter slime oozed across the marble island. Smokey the dragon sported a Band-Aid on his cardboard tail. Zoe's laughter ricocheted off stainless steel appliances. Cassidy's phone buzzed, an unknown Manhattan number. She swiped, cradling it between ear and shoulder while rinsing glue from Zoe's hair. Cassidy Rowe. Ms. Rowe, this is Dana Liu, Hawthorne Capital PR. The woman's voice could have sliced prosciutto. We need to discuss your social media presence. Cassidy's stomach dropped. I don't post about Zoe. You're tagged in 17 photos at a downtown art collective. One shows you painting a mural that says, "Eat the rich." Care to comment? The memory flashed. Last summer, pre-eviction, pre-Hawthorne. She'd been barefoot, tipsy on cheap rosé, brushing neon letters across a brick wall. Someone had snapped the shot. She hadn't known it survived Instagram. It's old, she said, and Zoe isn't in it. Mr. Hawthorne's investors are conservative. They Google everyone in his orbit. Delete the post, or we'll be forced to revisit your employment terms. The line went dead. Cassidy stared at the slime, heart hammering. Delete her past, or lose the future that paid rent. She deleted it. At noon, she and Zoe walked the 6 blocks to PS 29, drizzle misting their eyelashes. Zoe chatted about mermaids. Cassidy's thoughts churned. She felt scraped raw, as if a layer of skin had been peeled away with the photo. On the return trip, she bought coffee from a street cart, scanned headlines on her phone. Hawthorne Capital Eyes, Tubi Healthcare merger. Beneath it, a grainy paparazzi shot of Declan exiting a black car, jaw clenched, eyes winter cold. She pocketed the phone, guilt needling. Back upstairs, she cleaned slime residue, vacuumed glitter, started laundry. The washing machine hummed a lullaby. She drifted on the couch, exhaustion tugging. She woke to the sound of the elevator, 3:30, too early, and jerked upright. Declan stepped out, tie askew, shirt sleeves rolled. Raindrops jeweled his hair. He looked rumpled, human, dangerous. Meeting ended early, he said, voice rough. Thought I'd catch the Dragon Vet check. Cassidy stood too fast, head spinning. Zoe's in her room. Quiet time. He nodded, but didn't move. Water dripped from his cuffs onto the marble. Everything go smooth? Fine. She hesitated. PR called. His gaze sharpened. What did they want? She told him, words tumbling. Halfway through, he strode to the kitchen, poured 2 fingers of bourbon, drank. When she finished, he set the glass down with a controlled click. My company, my rules. Your past is yours. If investors don't like art, they can fund someone else. Shock rippled through her. They'll blame me for costing them money? They'll blame me for not controlling my employees. He stepped closer, rain-scented. I don't control you, Cass. The air between them crackled. She swallowed. I deleted it anyway. A muscle ticked in his jaw. Because you were scared. Because I need this job. Something shifted behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe regret. He lifted a hand as if to touch her cheek, dropped it. Next time, ask me before you erase yourself. Her breath caught. She wanted to lean into the space he'd almost filled. Instead, she said, You're wet. He glanced down, half-smiled. So I am. He shrugged off the jacket, hung it on a stool. The white shirt beneath clung to his shoulders. Cassidy's mouth went dry. Zoe wants spaghetti, she blurted. Spaghetti it is. He moved to the sink, rolled sleeves higher, and began chopping onions with the efficiency of a man who'd cooked out of necessity. Cassidy watched the flecks of tendons, the sure slide of knife. She should fetch Zoe. Instead, she stayed, anchored by the intimacy of shared kitchen light. He glanced sideways. You staying or just supervising? I can help. She washed her hands, took the parsley. Their elbows brushed. Neither moved away. Zoe appeared, rubbing eyes. Daddy, you're home. Declan set the knife down, wiped his hands, scooped her into his arms. She curled against him, tiny starfish fingers against his collar. Cassidy's chest ached at the picture, father and daughter framed in stainless steel perfection, a moment too tender to interrupt. He carried Zoe to the table, settled her with crayons. Smokey needs a purple cast, she announced. Cassidy tore her gaze away, focused on garlic, on breathing. Dinner was noisy, messy, Perfect. Zoe slurped noodles. Declan drank seltzer. Cassidy's cheeks hurt from smiling. Afterward, he read Zoe 2 chapters of Matilda, voice low, amused. Cassidy lingered in the doorway, arms crossed, unwilling to leave the warm circle of lamplight. When Zoe's lids drooped, Declan tucked her in, kissed her forehead, whispered something Cassidy couldn't catch. He emerged, pulling the door to a soft hush. Silence ballooned, thick, expectant. Cassidy busied herself loading the dishwasher. Declan leaned against the island, watching. "You're good with her," he said. "She's easy." She closed the dishwasher, wiped her hands. "I should go." "It's 8:30. "Late train," she lied. He studied her a beat. "Stay for coffee." The invitation hung between them, simple, loaded. She should refuse. She nodded. He brewed single-origin beans she couldn't pronounce, handed her a mug. They drifted to the couch, not quite touching. Outside, rain tapped the windows like impatient fingers. "Tell me about the mural," he said. She blinked. "Which one?" "The one PR made you delete?" Heat crawled up her neck. It was stupid. Rosé-fueled rant at gentrification. Sounds cathartic. She risked a glance. His expression was open, curious. She exhaled. "My neighborhood's gone. Bodega's a juice bar. Landlord raised rent 40%. I painted what I felt." Anger? Helplessness? She stared into the black mirror of coffee. "I'm not political. I just miss home." He set his mug down, turned toward her. "I bought that building last year." Her stomach dropped. "Oh? I didn't evict anyone. Previous owner did, but I profited." His voice was steady, self-accusing. "I never asked who left." The rain thickened. Cassidy swallowed. "You can't fix everything." "I can start by listening." The words were soft, dangerous. She met his eyes, amber flecked with green, guarded yet unflinching. The space between them shrank, the scent of soap and rain, the heat of his thigh, inches from hers. "Cass," her phone buzzed, Jose from downstairs. "Ms. Rowe, cab's here." She stood too fast, coffee sloshing. "I called before, didn't want to miss the last express." Declan rose, hands in pockets. "I'll walk you down." "No, rain. You'll get wet again." "I'm already wet." The double entendre hovered. Color stormed his cheeks. Cassidy bit back a laugh that felt too much like relief. At the elevator, he pressed the button, lingered. "Tomorrow. Same time?" 6:30, she confirmed. The doors slid open. She stepped inside, turned. He was watching her the way men watch fires, fascinated, wary of getting burned. "Good night, Declan." "Night, Cass." Doors closed. Descent began. She pressed a hand to her thundering heart, felt the future rearrange itself around a single truth. She was in trouble, and it had nothing to do with dragons or glitter. The next 3 weeks settled into a rhythm Cassidy hadn't known her body could hold. Dawn train, Zoe's sleepy weight against her hip, while Declan murmured stock prices into his phone, glitter in the grout lines of marble, bedtime stories that grew longer each night because neither adult interrupted. She stopped flinching when the elevator opened. He stopped apologizing for working late. Their sentences overlapped like well-worn duet lines. Shoes, inhaler, dragon wings, don't forget the field trip form. She told herself the hum under her ribs was productivity, not anticipation. Then came the Thursday the world tilted. Declan's calendar had spat up a black tie gala downtown, hospital wing dedication, donors, cameras. He hated them, Zoe said, because people talk too much and the food's tiny. Mrs. Lee was visiting her sister. Backup sitter had the flu. Cassidy expected him to cancel. Instead, he appeared in the kitchen at 6:30 in a tuxedo shirt unbuttoned at the throat, bow tie dangling like a question mark. "Come with us," he said, eyes on the cuff he was rolling. "Zoe's invited, but she won't go without you." Cassidy's hand stilled on the peanut butter knife. "I'm staff, Declan. Tonight you're camouflage," his mouth crooked, "and Zoe's security blanket. I'll pay overtime." "It's not the money," she almost said. It was the thought of silk against her skin, of cameras, of him in formal wear that turned the air metallic. She swallowed. "I don't own anything that costs more than rent." He disappeared, returned with a garment bag zipped in silver. "Sent Dana's assistant. Size 6, right?" The bag side open. Midnight blue silk, off one shoulder, slit to mid-thigh. Simple, lethal. Cassidy's reflection in the window looked suddenly breakable. Zoe danced in, wearing a miniature version in pale silver, twirling so the skirt belled. "We match. Dad said we'd stun them stupid." Cassidy snorted. "Stun them silent." "Same thing." Declan's voice dropped, intimate. "Say yes, Cass." She said yes. An hour later, she was slicked, polished, and terrified. The stylist he'd summoned, 20 minutes, apartment-wide flurry, had twisted her hair into a careless knot that cost more than her monthly Metro card, swiped gloss across her mouth, pronounced her dangerous. She barely recognized the legs emerging from the slit. Declan waited in the living room, whiskey untouched. When she walked in, his gaze traveled from her collarbone to the silver strappy heels and back, slow, deliberate. The air thickened. "You look," he began, stopped, started again. "You look like you belong." With you, the unsaid words hung, shimmering. Zoe slid her hand into Cassidy's. "Let's go before the limos get jealous." The venue was a glass-walled gallery cantilevered over the East River. City lights bled across black water. Helicopters thudded like distant drums. Cameras flared the moment they stepped onto the red carpet. Declan's hand on Zoe's shoulder, Cassidy a half step behind, pulse jackhammering. "Smile without teeth," he murmured. "They'll print anything if you look like you're hiding." She obeyed, felt the flashbulbs brand her retinas. Inside, crystal chandeliers dripped like frozen waterfalls. A string quartet sawed at Vivaldi. Waiters floated with trays of champagne flutes no bigger than test tubes. Declan was immediately swallowed. Handshakes, backslaps, "Mr. Hawthorne, the pediatric ICU thanks you." Cassidy steered Zoe toward the dessert table, trying to look invisible in silk that clung every time she breathed. A man materialized. Silver fox. Smile like a scalpel. "You must be the newest Hawthorne acquisition." His eyes grazed the slit in her dress. "Declan has excellent taste." Cassidy's spine straightened. "I'm Zoe's nanny, and you are?" "Leonard Vance. I run the foundation that just donated $10 million of Declan's money." He sipped, studying her over the rim. "Funny, he never mentioned a girlfriend." "I'm not his girlfriend." "Pity?" He leaned closer. "Word is he's lonely, hard to tell under all that ice." Before she could answer, Declan appeared beside her, hand sliding to the small of her back. Possessive, casual, devastating. "Leonard, stop harassing my staff," Vance chuckled. "Staff, is it? My mistake." He drifted off. Declan's thumb brushed the base of her spine, once, twice, then withdrew. "You okay?" "No," she wanted to say. "You touch me and the room tilts." "Fine." Zoe tugged her hand. "Can we see the violin guys up close?" They escaped to the far corner. Cassidy's skin burned where his palm had been. Dinner was a maze of cutlery and conversation she couldn't taste. She sat between Zoe and a pediatric oncologist who asked polite questions about childcare philosophy. Across the table, Declan conversed with the hospital CEO, but his eyes found hers every time she looked up, steady, unreadable. Between courses, the CEO raised a toast. "To Declan Hawthorne, whose generosity builds hope and whose dedication inspires us all." Applause rippled. Declan stood, glass in hand, voice calm, lethal. My daughter spent 3 nights in your NICU. The nurses who sang her to sleep earned every dollar tonight. I just signed the checks." He lifted the flute toward Cassidy. "And to the women who raise our children when the world demands we look away, thank you." Cameras flashed. Cassidy felt the room pivot toward her, curiosity sharp as broken glass. Heat flooded her chest. Zoe whispered, "Dad never toasts." After dessert, an auction began. Weekends in Tuscany, Picasso lithographs. Declan bid on nothing. When the lots ended, a dance floor opened under shifting lights. Couples swayed to a jazz trio. Zoe yawned hugely. "I should take her home," Cassidy said. "Stay," Declan replied. "One dance, then we'll all go." Zoe's eyes lit. "Can I sit with the violin lady? She said I could watch." Cassidy hesitated. The woman nodded, smiling. Zoe skipped off, fearless. Cassidy was suddenly alone with Declan in the middle of a spinning room. He extended a hand. "May I?" Every instinct screamed retreat. She placed her fingers in his. Electricity snapped up her arm. He led her onto the floor, settled one palm at her waist, fingers spread, proprietary. The other hand cradled hers against his chest. Through silk and cotton, she felt his heartbeat, steady, accelerating. They moved, slow, close enough that her thigh brushed his with each step. The slit of her dress parted. His thumb grazed bare skin. Featherlight, deliberate. She sucked in a breath. "You're trembling," he murmured. "Cold," she lied. He pulled her closer, heat radiating. "Better? Worse?" She could feel the hard line of his hip, the flex of muscle when he turned. His mouth hovered near her temple. Breath stirred the wisps of hair at her nape. "Your pulse is racing," he said, voice rough. "Yours too." A beat. "I noticed." The song ended, bled into another. Neither moved away. His hand slid lower, thumb tracing the hollow at the base of her spine. She felt the kiss of silk against her back as his fingers spread wider, anchoring. Her own hands had migrated to his shoulders, nails grazing the fine wool. "Cass," he breathed, almost inaudible. She tilted her face up. Their eyes locked, green flecked with gold, storm gray, blown wide. The room shrank to the space between their mouths. Camera flash, explosive. They jerked apart, breathing hard. A photographer lowered his lens, smirking. Declan's jaw clenched. "Excuse me." He strode toward the man, words too low to hear, but the photographer paled, deleted the shot, melted into the crowd. When Declan returned, the spell was fractured. Cassidy stepped back, arms folded. "We should go." He raked a hand through his hair. "Yeah." In the limo, Zoe fell asleep against Cassidy's shoulder, dragon plush clutched to her chest. City lights strobed across Declan's face, carving angles and secrets. He didn't speak, but his knee rested inches from hers, heat radiating. At the penthouse, he carried Zoe to bed, returned to find Cassidy in the kitchen, unclipping earrings. She heard him pause in the doorway, felt his gaze travel the length of her spine, the tilt of her hip against the counter. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For tonight. For her." She turned. "I'm not sorry about the dance." His eyes darkened. "Neither am I." Silence stretched, thick with everything they weren't saying. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides, stopped a breath away. "I have rules," he murmured. "Lines I don't cross. You work for me. You live in my daughter's heart. Those lines are still there," she finished, voice shaking. He lifted a hand, brushed a knuckle along her jaw. Barely contact, yet it scorched. "I'm trying." "Me too." His hand dropped. "Good night, Cass." He left before she could answer. She didn't sleep. At 2 a.m. she stood at her bedroom window, silk dress pooled on the floor, city humming below. Her phone buzzed. Text, unknown number. Photo attached. The dance, his hand at her waist, her face tipped toward his. blurred but unmistakable. Message. Nice shot. Page 6 once more. How much is silence worth? Her blood turned to ice. She screenshot everything, thumbs trembling, then forwarded the entire thread to Declan with one line. I'm sorry. Within minutes, her phone rang. His voice, low, lethal. Pack an overnight bag. I'm coming to get you. Declan, you're not dealing with this alone. The line went dead. She stared at the screen, heart hammering against the future cracking open. Lines, she realized, were already crossed. The Escalade screamed to a halt at the curb of her Crown Heights walk-up, hazard lights strobing amber against the wet brick. Cassidy flew down the stoop, duffel bumping her hip, hoodie zipped over yesterday's silk dress like contraband. Declan leaned across the passenger seat, shoved the door open. Get in. No greeting, no tie, white shirt unbuttoned at the throat, jacket missing, eyes like midnight storms. She tumbled inside. The SUV surged before her seatbelt clicked. Where's Zoe? Asleep at Mrs. Lee's. She thinks I'm on a red-eye. His knuckles blanched on the wheel. We're going to my lawyer. Then we end this. Cassidy's phone pinged again. Another withheld number. $50, $1,000 by midnight, or the girl gets front-page grief. She swallowed bile. I can't pay that. You won't. His voice was flint. I will, but not the way they think. They drove south, bridge lights smearing across the windshield. He laid out the plan. Wire trace, FBI contact, sting at the drop site. He spoke in clipped boardroom bullets, but his right hand found her left, squeezed hard enough to hurt. She let him. The law office occupied the 42nd floor of a Wall Street tower. Glass, steel, silence. A night shift paralegal led them to a conference room where coffee appeared without being asked. Declan's lawyer, a razor-blade blonde named Sloan, listened to the story, eyes narrowing. Extortion, attempted blackmail, threat to minor. We get a warrant, trace the transfer, nail them to the wall. She looked at Cassidy. You're the victim here. Don't flinch. Cassidy nodded, throat dry. Declan stood behind her chair, presence a shield. Sloan drafted an affidavit. Cassidy signed until her wrist cramped. At 3:42 a.m., the FBI cyber unit took over her phone, cloned it, set up a controlled escrow account. We'll make the drop look real, the agent explained. Once they access the funds, we have them. Cassidy's stomach churned. What if they leak the photo anyway? Declan's hand settled on her shoulder. Then we leak the truth first, and sue them into oblivion. Dawn bled gray over the harbor by the time they left. Declan didn't drive home. He headed north through Holland Tunnel into New Jersey Pine Barrens, radio off, windows down. Exhaustion fuzzed the edges of Cassidy's vision, but she refused to close her eyes. The quiet felt precarious like a held breath. He finally pulled off the highway onto a dirt road that wound through scrub oak and leaning pines. Gravel popped under tires until the trees parted, revealing a cedar-shingled cottage perched above a private lake. Mist hovered over the water like exhaled secrets. Weekend place, he said. No staff, no cameras, no cell service if I turn the booster off. He cut the engine. Silence poured in, thick as wool. Cassidy stepped out, legs trembling. You brought hostages to your hideout? She tried to joke. You're not a hostage. He unlocked the door, shouldered her bag. You're the only person I need to keep safe. Inside smelled of cedar and coffee grounds left too long in the pot. A stone fireplace dominated the living room. Plaid blankets draped a leather couch scarred by age and lake damp. Books everywhere, dog-eared thrillers, biographies, a shelf of Zoe's picture books. Family photos in mismatched frames, Zoe as a newborn on his bare chest. A laughing brunette who must have been her mother. Same eyes, gentler smile. Cassidy looked away, feeling like trespass. Declan moved through the rooms, turning on lamps, starting a fire with the automatic efficiency of a man who'd spent boyhood summers stacking wood. When the flames caught, he finally faced her. "Sleep. We'll know something by noon." She meant to argue, but the couch embraced her. She heard him unzip her duffel, drape a blanket over her shoulders, smelled cedar and rain and his cologne fading into smoke. She woke to the sound of chopping, steady, rhythmic. Afternoon light slanted through windows. The fire had dwindled to embers. She found him on the back deck, shirt sleeves rolled, splitting logs. Each swing of the axe bared the rigid line of his back. She watched, throat tight, until he noticed her. "Any news?" she asked. "FBI traced the IP to a burner in Queens. They're lifting prints. No leak so far." He set the axe down, wiped sweat with his forearm. "Hungry?" She nodded. He disappeared inside, returned with 2 sweating bottles of beer, a loaf of crusty bread, cheese that smelled like earth. They ate on the dock, legs dangling over murky water. "Tell me something no reporter knows," he said suddenly. She tore a piece of bread, considering. "I used to sneak into the Met after closing. Security guard on the night shift, felt sorry for broke art students. I'd copy Caravaggio with stolen charcoal until dawn." He studied her profile. "You never told Zoe that." "She's 6. Breaking and entering is a gateway story." He laughed, short, surprised, softening the angles of his face. "Your turn," she said. He peeled the label from his bottle. "I still write Zoe postcards from her mom. Date them, stamp them, hide them in her memory box. One day I'll give her the stack and pretend they arrived late." Cassidy's heart cracked open. She reached, covered his hand with hers. He turned his palm up, laced their fingers. The lake lapped beneath them. Somewhere, a loon called, lonely. Evening drifted in violet layers. They grilled steaks, ate off paper plates, licked butter from their thumbs. He built the fire higher. When the stars emerged, he produced a Bluetooth speaker, cued jazz low enough to talk over. "Dance?" he asked. "No music." "Sure there is." He pulled her to her feet, settled a hand at her waist. They swayed, barefoot on cool boards, hips brushing. The kiss happened the way dawn does, slow, inevitable. His mouth tasted of smoke and salt. His stubble scraped her cheek. She sighed into him, fingers sliding into damp hair at his nape. He pressed closer, groan rumbling against her ribs. They broke apart, breathing hard. Foreheads touched. "Line," he whispered. "I know." She kissed him again, deeper, tongue sliding against his. Fire cracked behind them. Water slapped the dock. His hand skimmed down her spine, cupped the curve where silk met skin, traced the hollow beneath the hem of her borrowed t-shirt. Every nerve ending sparked. He pulled back first, resting his brow against hers. "Not here. Not like this." She understood. Too much adrenaline, too little certainty. She nodded, pressed her face into his throat, felt his pulse hammer against her lips. Inside, he banked the fire, locked doors. They climbed the narrow staircase together, shoulders brushing. At the landing, he paused. "Separate rooms?" he asked, voice rough. She touched the front of his shirt, felt the heat radiating. "Don't want to be separate." He exhaled, opened the first door. A queen bed, patchwork quilt, windows facing the lake. Moonlight striped the quilt silver. He stood in the doorway, hands clenched at his sides. "You sure?" She answered by stepping close, rising on tiptoe, kissing the corner of his mouth. He made a low sound, arms closing around her. They moved inside. The door clicked shut. Clothes fell away like protocol shed. Shirt, belt, the silk dress she'd worn for 36 hours, now smelling of lake air and want. He paused at the clasp of her bra, waiting. She took his wrist, guided his palm to the front clasp, let the lace drop. He breathed her name, Cass, like surrender, bent to mouth the curve of her breast, tongue circling until she arched. She tugged his shirt free, pushed it off his shoulders, mapped the spread of muscle, the scatter of old scars, small, pale, stories she'd ask for later. They stumbled to the bed. He laid her down, followed, covering her with heat and weight. She opened her thighs, cradled him, felt the hard press of his want through cotton. He rocked once, twice, groaning. "Slow," he whispered. "Let me." She nodded, nails scoring the flat of his back. He kissed down her throat, between her breasts, across the trembling plane of her stomach. When his mouth reached the lace edge of her panties, she threaded fingers into his hair. He looked up, eyes dark, asking. She lifted her hips. Lace slid away. The first touch of his tongue was gentle, exploratory, the second deeper, deliberate. She bit her lip, thighs falling wider. He tasted her slowly, lavishly, as if memorizing tide lines. When she whimpered, he slid one finger inside, then two, curling until her back bowed off the mattress. Pleasure coiled, tight and bright. She tugged his shoulders. "Inside, please." He rose, shucked the rest of his clothes, produced protection from the nightstand drawer with shaking hands. She took the foil, tore it open, rolled it down him, fingers brushing velvet steel. He shuddered. He settled between her thighs, nudged entrance, paused. "Look at me." She met his eyes, raw, open, stripped of boardroom armor. He pushed in, slow, inch by inch, watching her face. She stretched around him, burn melting into fullness. When he was seated fully, he stilled, forehead dropping to hers. "Okay?" "More than." She rolled her hips. He groaned, withdrew, slid home again. They found a rhythm, unhurried, deep, the lake outside keeping time against the dock. Sweat bloomed between them, breaths fractured. She felt the orgasm build, different, slower, seismic. He reached between their bodies, thumbs circling. She came with a muffled cry, inner muscles clenching around him. He followed seconds later, burying his face in her neck, body shuddering, her name broken against her skin. After, they lay tangled, hearts hammering sync. He traced idle circles on her shoulder. "Still lines?" she whispered. "Blurred," he answered, "but not broken." She pressed a kiss to the hollow of his throat, tasted salt and smoke. "We'll redraw them tomorrow." He pulled the quilt over them, tucked her against his chest. Outside, the lake kept its secrets. Inside, two adults who had crossed every line they'd drawn began, carefully, consciously, to sketch new ones. Dawn slid through the cedar shutters in pale blades, catching on the rumpled quilt and the bare skin of Cassidy's shoulder. She surfaced slowly, awareness returning in layers. The ache between her thighs, the unfamiliar ceiling, the warm weight of Declan's arm anchored across her waist. For a moment, she let herself pretend this was ordinary, waking up beside a man who smelled of lake water and last night's surrender. Then her phone buzzed on the nightstand, loud in the hush, and reality poured back in like cold rain. She twisted gently, reaching. Declan's eyes opened instantly. Predator reflex, she thought, then softened when they found her. "Anything?" he murmured, voice gravel rough. She checked the screen, a single text from Agent Ruiz. Package delivered. "Prince match. Warrant issued. You're clear?" Relief buckled her knees. She showed him. His exhale was half laugh, half prayer. He dragged her down, kissed her hard, morning stubble scraping her cheek. "It's over." Not everything, she wanted to say, but his mouth was already traveling south, tasting collarbone, breast, the curve where waist meets hip. She forgot the words. They made love again, slower, daylight, honest. He mapped every freckle with fingertips and tongue, learned the way she shivered when he kissed the inside of her elbow, The small sound she made when he entered her from behind, hand flat on her belly, anchoring her close. After, they lay tangled, hearts drumming sync. "Check out his 11, he said against her hair. "We could stay another night." She traced the scar beneath his ribs, small, crescent, surgical. "Zoe expects you home." "Zoe adores you. She'll survive one more bedtime story over FaceTime." Cassidy pressed her face to his chest, inhaled cedar and sex and the faint metallic note of aftershave. "We still have to talk about us." His hand stilled on her spine. "I know." They didn't talk on the drive back. The SUV ate miles of Pine Barren Road while NPR murmured between them like a chaperone. Cassidy watched his profile, jaw tight, eyes hidden behind aviators, and felt the first threads of doubt cinch beneath her ribs. Last night had been a shelter. Manhattan was a minefield. As the city rose on the horizon, he finally spoke. "Sloan drew up a contract addendum, confidentiality clause, retroactive to your hire date. You sign, they can't subpoena you, can't print you, can't even ask your shoe size." She turned the page he handed her, thick bond, Hawthorne letterhead. Paragraph 4 stipulated personal relationship disclosure optional. Her stomach hollowed. Optional meaning, I can pretend nothing happened? Meaning you're protected either way. His knuckles whitened on the wheel. "I'm not asking you to sign away last night." But he was giving her an exit ramp, polite, bloodless, corporate. She swallowed the taste of lake smoke and her own moans, signed on the dash, folded the page into her pocket. They collected Zoe from Mrs. Lee's at 4. The girl launched herself at Cassidy, chattering about sleepover cookies and a new magic trick. She didn't notice the way Cassidy's arms lingered, as if storing up the weight of her. Declan watched from the doorway, unreadable. At bedtime, Zoe produced the dragon, now sporting a sparkly cast. "He fought a shark," she declared, "lost a toe, but he's brave." Cassidy tucked her in, sang the lullaby off-key, kissed the bandaged toe. When she straightened, Declan was leaning against the jamb, tie gone, shirt open at the throat. "Stay," he said quietly. She wanted to. God, she wanted. But the contract burned in her pocket like a brand. "I have laundry, early train." His mouth tightened. "I'll drive you." Jose already called a cab. She brushed past him, heartbeat frantic. In the elevator, she stared at her reflection. Same thrift store jacket, same paint under her nails, same mouth that had gasped his name at 2 a.m., and felt the gulf widen between who she'd been at the lake and who she had to be now. Over the next week, the paparazzi vanished. FBI leak, Sloan implied. The photo never surfaced. Life resumed its choreography. Dawn train, glitter, bedtime stories. But everything hummed with new voltage. Declan's hand found excuses to rest at the small of her back. She leaned into it before remembering to step away. They spoke in code. "Did you try the new Ethiopian place?" Meaning, "I want to take you there alone." "Zoe's asleep," meaning, "Come closer." They didn't come. Closer. Friday brought disaster in a manila envelope. Cassidy was flattening Play-Doh planets when Jose buzzed up. "Legal courier for Ms. Rowe." Her signature was requested on a second envelope, inside a single sheet. Notice of custody petition. Leonard Vance, the silver fox from the gala, was suing for full custody of Zoe on behalf of an unnamed close family friend. Grounds: immoral environment, inappropriate cohabitation, media scandal risk. Every page listed Cassidy as Exhibit A. Her hand shook so hard the paper rattled. Declan arrived within 20 minutes, Sloan on his heels. He read the petition once, face shuddering to ice. "Vance is a board member with delusions of chivalry. He thinks I'm unfit because He stopped, jaw clenched. "Because you slept with the nanny," Sloan finished, brutal. "He'll subpoena the lake house security logs if they exist." "They don't," Declan snapped. I bought that place for privacy. Cassidy felt the room tilt. They can use me to take her away from you. They can try. His voice was flint. They'll lose? But she saw the calculation in Sloane's eyes. Legal fees, depositions, headlines. The contract in her pocket suddenly felt like tissue paper. That night, after Zoe slept, Cassidy found him on the terrace, skyline glittering beyond his silhouette. I should resign, she said. He spun, eyes wild. No. It's the fastest way to neutralize them. It's the fastest way to break Zoe's heart, and mine. She stepped closer, wind whipping her hair across his cheek. I won't be the reason you lose her. He caught her wrists, pulled her in. You're the reason I haven't lost myself, his voice cracked. Don't leave me to fight this alone. Tears blurred the city lights. Then we fight together, publicly, cleanly. No more hiding. His mouth crashed down on hers, hard, desperate, tasting of fear and fury, and something that felt like forever. She kissed him back, open, claiming, until breath was memory. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. Together, he vowed. Tomorrow they would call lawyers, draft statements, face cameras. Tonight she let him lead her inside, up the stairs, past the line they'd drawn and erased and drawn again. In his bedroom, dark, familiar now, he undressed her slowly, as if unwrapping evidence of innocence. She undressed him, cataloging scars, the small surgical crescent, a new bruise across ribs from yesterday's squash game, the faint stretch marks on his hips that spoke of growth spurts and ambition. They moved to the bed, mouths urgent, hands mapping territory now known but no less electric. He entered her on a sigh, paused, eyes locked. Stay, he whispered, through all of it. Stay. She answered with her body, legs wrapping, hips rolling, nails scoring encouragement into his shoulders. When she came, she bit his collarbone to muffle the cry. When he followed, he breathed her name like a prayer against her throat. After, they lay tangled, city humming below, lawsuit looming above. Whatever comes, he said, voice rough with aftershock, we face it side by side. She pressed her lips to the pulse in his neck, felt it leap beneath her mouth. Side by side, she promised, and hoped the world would be kind enough to let the line they'd drawn in sand hold against the tide. The courthouse steps were a furnace of flashing bulbs and shouted questions. Cassidy kept her gaze fixed on the brass doors, Zoe's small hand sweaty inside hers, Declan's other arm a steel bar across her back. Sloane walked point, blazer flaring like battle standard. Inside, the air tasted of varnish and old victories. Leonard Vance waited at the plaintiff's table, silver hair lacquered, smile thin as subpoena paper. His lawyer, a blonde shark in 4-inch heels, eyed Cassidy like chum. Across the aisle, Declan's legal team spread folders like artillery. Judge Mendez entered, black robes snapping the room to silence. Opening statements were swift, surgical. Vance's counsel painted Cassidy as a reckless opportunist who'd infiltrated the Hawthorne home, exposing Zoe to moral jeopardy and media carnage. They projected the blurred gala photo, Declan's hand at her waist, her face tilted in candlelight intimacy. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Declan's lead counsel, a former federal prosecutor named Ruiz, countered, Mr. Hawthorne's private life is not a custody battlefield. Ms. Rowe's employment record is unblemished, her bond with Zoe therapeutic, her character attested by teachers, doctors, and child psychologists. She entered affidavits into evidence, then played the FaceTime clip, Zoe laughing in her hospital bed, Cassidy beside her, both singing Yellow Submarine to pass chemo hours. The courtroom stilled. Then came the cross. Vance's lawyer rose, heels clicking. Ms. Rowe, you shared a hotel room with Mr. Hawthorne the night of the gala, correct? Cassidy's pulse thundered. She felt Declan's eyes, steady, willing her strength. We stayed at a lake house, separate rooms. But the photo shows a dance, nothing indecent, nothing that harmed Zoe. The lawyer leaned in. You're in love with your employer? A hush fell, sharp as broken crystal. Cassidy drew breath, met the woman's stare. I'm in love with the man who puts his daughter first, who signs her casts, who reads her 3 chapters every night. If that's a crime, I'm guilty. A collective exhale. Even the judge's pen paused. Vance's counsel changed tack, introducing a sealed envelope, purportedly Cassidy's deleted Instagram post, "Eat the rich." Is this your work, Ms. Rowe? Ruiz objected. Hearsay, irrelevant, overruled. Cassidy lifted the printout. Yes, painted 3 years ago after my neighborhood pharmacy became a vape. Lounge? Art isn't sedition, it's speech. Speech that maligns the very class Mr. Hawthorne belongs to? Declan stood. Your Honor, may I address the court? Mendez raised a brow. Briefly, Mr. Hawthorne. He moved to the railing, voice calm, lethal. I grew up in rent-controlled housing. My first company crashed twice before it flew. I signed paychecks for 500 families. If Ms. Rowe wants to critique wealth, she critiques me, and I welcome it. Growth requires mirrors. He turned to Vance. Leonard signs my board checks, then lectures me on morality. The hypocrisy is noted. A ripple of laughter. Vance's cheeks mottled. Closing arguments wrapped by 4. Judge Mendez retired to chambers. The hallway erupted. Cassidy escaped to the restroom, splashed water on her wrists, breathed until the trembling stopped. When she emerged, Declan waited alone, suit jacket slung over his shoulder, tie askew. Whatever happens, he said, we've told the truth. That's already a win. She wanted to kiss him, desperately, but cameras still prowled. She settled for squeezing his hand. They waited 5 days. 5 days of jumpy phones, of Zoe asking if she needed to pack for Daddy's friend's house, of Cassidy waking every dawn certain the world had tilted. The call came at 9:12 a.m. Ruiz, voice steady. Judgment in our favor. Full dismissal. Vance ordered to pay costs. Judge commended your candor, Ms. Rowe. Cassidy sank to the kitchen floor, phone clattering. Zoe pounced, squealing. Declan lifted them both, spinning until laughter turned to tears nobody tried to hide. Summer unfurled gold and humid. The photo scandal died without oxygen. A gossip site ran a follow-up, The Nanny Who Taught a Billionaire to Dance, featuring Zoe's crayon drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a purple sun. Sales of children's art supplies spiked 300%. Cassidy framed the original, hung it in the penthouse hallway where glitter could safely fall. Declan's board grumbled, then pivoted, inviting Cassidy to join the Hawthorne Foundation's Advisory Council on Pediatric Art Therapy. She accepted, stipulating a modest salary and flexible hours. The first meeting she wore thrift store blazer and Converse. By the third, she'd added pink laces. Zoe's choice. One August dusk, they drove to Coney Island. Just the 3 of them. Baseball caps and sunglasses for camouflage. Zoe rode the carousel twice, Declan photographing her airborne hair. Later, they ate Nathan's fries on the pier, sunset bleeding orange across the tide. Zoe fell asleep on Cassidy's lap, salt sticky in her curls. Declan watched them, expression unreadable. You're her safe place, he said quietly. So are you. He reached into his pocket, produced a small velvet box. Not ring-sized, smaller, rounder. He flipped it open, a silver locket engraved on the back with 3 tiny stars. Inside, a microphoto, Zoe's. First day of first grade, Declan's arm around Cassidy's waist, all of them laughing. For you, he said, from both of us? Tears blurred the boardwalk lights. She kissed him, soft and public, no cameras watching. September arrived with school supply lists and earlier sunsets. Cassidy moved her few boxes from the shared Crown Heights walk-up to the penthouse. Slowly, deliberately, one plant, then three, then her grandmother's easel set up in the guest room turned studio. Declan cleared half his closet, left a drawer open like a question she could answer when ready. Zoe labeled dresser edges with neon stickers, Cass's socks, Cass's magic brushes. The first night all her toiletries lived here. She stood at the bathroom mirror, brushing teeth beside him, fluorescent paste on his chin, her hair a damp cloud, and felt the future click into place, audible as a seatbelt engaging. One rainy Saturday, they built a pillow fort so large the housekeeper had to vacuum around it for 2 days. Inside, flashlights created constellations on sheet ceilings. Zoe narrated dragon sagas. Declan produced champagne for grown-ups and chocolate milk for royalty. When Zoe finally slept between them, Cassidy whispered into the dark, "We never defined this." His arm tightened around her waist. "Define it now." She traced the rim of his watch, heart steady. Partners, parents, lovers. In whatever order the day demands. He kissed the top of her head. Forever sounds less like a contract, more like a promise. "Then promise," she breathed. "I do," he said. Simple, irrevocable. Outside, rain kept falling, washing the city clean for whatever came next. Autumn burned into gold. Central Park became their backyard. Soccer Saturdays, leaf pile Sundays, Declan's laughter echoing across Sheep Meadow like bells. Cassidy's mural collective invited her back. She painted a 3-story dragon breathing stars across a Bronx community center. Zoe perched on scaffolding beside her, safety harness snug under Declan's anxious supervision. One evening, the collective threw a block party. Declan manned the grill in a kiss-the-cook apron Zoe had chosen. Cassidy sold prints for charity. Neighbors who once side-eyed the billionaire now asked him to flip plantains. Someone started music. Someone else dragged out speakers. Under strings of fairy lights, Declan pulled her into a slow sway, Zoe spinning around their legs like a comet. "Remember the first dance?" he murmured. "Every second." "Still think lines are blurred?" She smiled against his neck. "I think lines are whatever we draw together and erase together when love outgrows them." He spun her out, reeled her in, kissed her while the neighborhood applauded. Winter arrived soft. First snow dusting the penthouse terrace. They built a snow dragon complete with glitter wings. Zoe christened it Frost Smoky. Declan taught her to make snow angels. Cassidy photographed the eye. Moment, his dark coat contrasted against white, wings spread wide, face tilted to sky. A man learning to fall without fear. Christmas Eve, they hosted Zoe's classmates for cocoa and cookie decorating. Flowers snowstormed the kitchen. Sugar crystals crunched under socks. After the last parent left, Declan produced a small velvet pouch. Inside, a key, old brass, ornate. "For the lake house," he said. "Ours, not mine. Yours too. Paint the walls, plant the garden, name the rooms, whatever forever looks like to you." Cassidy's eyes filled. She slipped the key onto her key ring beside the penthouse fob and the locket she hadn't removed since summer. New Year's Day, sunrise pink over the harbor, they stood on the terrace, 3 silhouettes wrapped in one blanket, Zoe between them, sleepy and sticky with maple syrup from celebratory waffles. "Resolution?" Cassidy asked. Zoe, "Teach Frost Smoky to breathe fire." Declan, "Build a life big enough for all our dragons." Cassidy, "Keep drawing outside the lines and keep erasing them when love asks." They raised paper cups of orange juice, clinked, drank while the city woke beneath them. Epilogue, spring. The cherry blossoms along the lake road burst like pink fireworks. Cassidy opened windows, let breeze carry lake smell and birdsong through cedar rooms. She painted a mural on the bedroom wall, Three figures holding hands beneath a dragon-shaped constellation, tail curling into an infinity sign. Declan watched from the doorway, arms crossed, eyes soft. "You've made this place breathe." She turned, brush between teeth, hair streaked cobalt. "You gave me the walls, I gave them color," Zoe burst in, clutching a jar of tadpoles. "They're turning into frogs. Can we keep them?" Declan lifted her, tadpoles and all. "We keep everything that grows. Tadpoles, dreams, people who teach us how to fall without breaking." Cassidy set the brush down, crossed to them, pressed her lips to the corner of his mouth, then to Zoe's sticky cheek. Outside, the lake lapped, patient, eternal. Inside, 3 heartbeats found the same rhythm: home, home, home. Some stories end with weddings or white lace. Theirs ended with a dragon breathing stars over still water, with a man learning softness, a woman learning trust, a child learning that love can redraw the sky. And every summer, when the meteor shower arcs across the lake, they lie on the dock. Declan, Cassidy, Zoe, hands linked, eyes wide, falling together through constellations they renamed after courage, after hope, after the simple, terrifying truth that lines are only ink, and love is the eraser that turns them into flight.